So let me introduce myself. I'm Joe. I'm a product manager with C3AI, and I'm here today with KD.
Hi, everyone. My name is Costa, but I go by KD, my initials. I'm also a platform product manager like Joao. And we're going to be talking about AI application development. Just a brief disclaimer, we're going to go back and forth between slides and demos to tell you a story. So bear with us as there are some gaps here and there. But we'd like to start with basically a few context setting slides.
Yeah, so before we deep dive into how C3AI platform actually accelerates the development and delivery of what we call enterprise AI applications, let's mostly look at the historical picture. So it used to be enough for your IT orgs to deliver mostly static reports, and these reports were, for the most part, based on structured data. And then that was no longer enough. So then business started demanding more of the IT sector. They started asking for mostly workflow-driven applications where you could have business SMEs in context getting insights from the application, and then right from the application going from insight, looking at data, going from insight all the way to action. Now, as we've seen in today's conference, that's no longer enough. Right now, we live in a world where we no longer need to just deal with structured data. We still need to do that, but now we need to be able to ingest massive amounts of structured and unstructured data. We also need to provide and equip our business folks with not just insights about what happened in the past, but also give them an equipment with predictions about what actions and give them recommendations of that is going to improve their decision-making abilities. And since these recommendations are mostly going to be leveraged by humans to accelerate workflows, the recommendations themselves need to be kind of backed by an evidence package. And so these are all the capabilities that an enterprise AI application needs to pack. And to deliver on this, we can see that the complexity of the delivery and productization of these enterprise AI applications has been growing ever since. And so I think there's two pieces to the complexity story. One piece is you need to have what we call multi-role teams collaborating. So these are teams composed of data scientists, application developers, operations, data engineers to kind of figure out how to load data into the system, and subject matter experts. And that's one piece of the equation. The other piece is that all of these stakeholders, and it's not easy to make them work together towards a shared vision and shared goal. But the second piece of where complexity arises is from the fact that these stakeholders are increasingly leveraging hyper-specialized tools. Now, hyper-specialized tools are actually great because they allow these personas and stakeholders to move really fast, but these tools were not really designed or thought to work well and integrate well together. So most of the complexity arises from having these folks work in silos with siloed tools, and then you need to figure out how to quickly ingest all the work that they've done, all the way from building the machine learning aspects of the application, building the backend of the application, building the UI of the application, and then deploying it and making it accessible to the business. And so in this session, we're going to be mostly focusing on the application lifecycle. We're going to walk you through back-end development, front-end development, running tests, and putting the application in production. Right after this session, we're going to do a separate session, mostly focused on all the data science and machine learning aspects of the application. So if you want to learn more about data science and how C3AI platform accelerates data science and machine learning productization, stick around. We're going to learn more about that.
Awesome. So, the obvious question then becomes, how might we or how can we enable a multi-role AI team to accelerate this application development or application delivery process, right? And to answer this, we're going to take you through a story. And for the sake of this session, we're going to scope it to small tweaks and configurations, but really those same principles can be extended to larger scale full-fledged applications, and we're glad to talk about that in more detail after this session. But let's say you're about to go live with a specific product or feature, and you have this stakeholder meeting where we get some small feedback and say, hey, we want to make this small tweak. You might get an email like this, right? And in that case, your team might already be working on multiple different applications or projects, And so they need some context. They need to be able to understand what exactly the requirements are. And then once they have that, after they switch context, make those changes quickly and iteratively, right? So to start that off, we're going to go into a quick demo.
So bear with us. We're just switching setups to actually do a live demo.
Good. And we're going to start off with what we call C3 AI Studio. This is our interface into the platform. It's the entry point for all those different members of that multi-role AI team that we were talking about. So data scientists go through this, developers go through this, both front-end and back-end, operations engineers, subject matter experts, all of them sort of go through this one central area. And in here, you can see a few different things at a high level. You can see high-level metrics showing the environment's applications. You can see a list of which ones have been running and which ones are running in terms of applications and environments. And you also have access to additional resources. And these are documentation related, community related. Community is sort of our Stack Overflow, right, for all C3 stuff. So we have all those links right in here and there. And then within Studio, we have a tool called the application canvas. Now the application canvas is a visual representation of that application in terms of nodes. It represents basically the data flowing in, so the data integration or data ingestion pipeline, and then it shows you the types that are backed by data. You can see a little grid over here on some of these types, and this is where the data is stored. And then ultimately it goes from there to show you the UI where the data is actually rendered, right, in a visual interface. And so this is a tool that we really think and we have found to be useful for someone to gain context to a specific application. So going back to that story, right, you had a team, they had to jump onto a specific application to run a fix. This is how they get context immediately, understand what's going on. If I click on a specific, or if I search for a specific node, in this case, I'm gonna search for a wind turbine. It's immediately highlighted, right? And then you can see the list of fields or properties that are on this type. If there's any data, you can preview that data, right? And this data has already been loaded, but you can sort of see what this one might be useful for, right? All right. Now, in the story that we have, we're gonna go into some code here. We're gonna talk a little bit through some of the nitty-gritty details here to give you an idea of what really happens, right? So going back to that story, we have a requirement. We want to make a back-end change first. That back-end change is going to help influence that front-end change that Joao is going to make later on during this session. And so the platform is really well integrated with VS Code through an extension that the platform team has worked on for VS Code, a C3 AI extension. Now this extension allows a lot of different utilities, which I'll summarize, but first let's go through a few steps of the demo. Here you can see in our welcome page that we're connected to an environment. It says right here that I'm connected. If I just hover over this guy, it says, hey, I'm connected to this specific environment. This is all happening remotely. It's happening in the cloud. So whatever changes I make here happen directly over there. In this section over here, you can see that I have a list of my packages. This is basically where the code for those applications live. I know it's a little small here. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit. You can see, for example, this wind turbine has a green circle next to it. This is the application that's running live. That's the one I just showed you. In this tool, we also have a tester location. Testing is a huge part of our development flow. We do test-driven development. And so being able to test right here in the same tool is a huge productivity gain. In this case, you can see I have 3 tests that I've already run. The results are right here. This last one failed specifically on this last test. It says, expected 12 to be 13. The test file's over here. The failure is on a certain line. Now we're going to go back to the wind turbine type, and we're going to add a field. Before we do that, let me just quickly summarize the other quick functionalities and developer utilities that you have within this extension. So if you want to understand what's actually happening, what is an entity type, you can see this is stored in a database, automatically has persistence. It mixes, which is basically inheritance, this type called ML subject. And this is a type that has a lot of properties that you would benefit from as a data scientist to develop any sort of models. And this is something that the team after this session will continue on talk about in more detail.
And maybe one detail, this is a platform type, right? It comes baked into platform.
It comes baked into the platform, so there's a lot of functionalities and capabilities that you can leverage out of the box. You can also do sort of the classic stuff that you would expect in IDE. You can go and peek at the definition here. This is another type. When I go to peek it, it's just going to pull it up right here. So this sort of integrated flows here that really help developers go from one type to another type, traversal of a data model. You can do the same thing for implementation functions. So I can go and peek into the implementation. This is going to be an actual JavaScript function in this case, which is giving me the statistics for gear oil temperature. But in this case, I'm going to add a new field. I'm going to add a specific calculated field that's going to influence that UI. I have a handy dandy notebook here so I don't mess up some of the copy pasting. For the sake of this demo, we'll go here, we're going to add it here. I'm going to press save. Now when I press save, I actually got an error because I did something wrong. And I did this, of course, for the sake of the demo to show you that we have a lot of instant feedback here. A lot of response and a lot of feedback that we got in older versions of the application development process was that, hey, it's a little slow to get feedback immediately. We would have it, if we have it quicker, we can iterate faster, and iterating faster gives us a lot more productivity. In this case, for example, the error is pretty clear. It's telling me that, hey, if I hover over here or see the error right here, I'm missing a colon. So I'm going to add that colon. Oops, not over there, but over here. And press save. And then as I save, I can see it change state here. It's going to go into a solid green state, which means that, hey, it's synced to the cloud, it's validated, you're good to go. You also saw those issues disappear, right? And at this point, I have done my back-end work so that Joao can continue on and make front-end changes and tweaks later in the demo. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here. Let me make sure that I play from current slide. All right, so just to summarize what we saw, right? We saw the AI Studio, and we only saw a small portion of the AI Studio. We saw the landing page and we saw a canvas, but really this is a tool that provides a bunch of these multi-role AI team members with different functionalities. This is where the code meets the visuals. We have tools for data-related workflows, we have tools for ML-related workflows, we have tools for application development, and tools for DevOps or DevSecOps. And it's the one-stop shop really for configuring, developing, deploying, and monitoring your applications. We also saw the extension. The extension is really the central area for all code development that follows after design and architecture, right? Here you write tests, you develop code, make sure those tests pass, right? And at a certain point, you're ready for the CI process, which we'll touch upon at the end. And as you saw, the extension has a bunch of different features across testing and debugging, which we didn't go into full detail, but we can go into detail after in the sessions. It has code completion, it has a JavaScript notebook, it has environment controls, and plenty more that we can go into more detail after. I'm just going to quickly, is it not showing? We're still good for a presentation? Okay, perfect. So we're going to quickly summarize again these parts of the extension here. There's an area where you can see live applications, you can create new files. There's a place where you can run tests, view their results. There's a spot where you can write code, you can write tests, the general sort of editor area. There's an output tab where you can see changes and get feedback immediately in case something is broken, in case something needs to be fixed. There's a notebook here that's handy for scripts. You can run commands against a remote environment. You can do data queries. Oops. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Joao to talk more about the UI.
So modern UI development is actually really complex because if you think about it, specifically if you think about delivering a React.js application or a Vue.js application or a mobile application, what the business cares about is kind of what we call the presentational layer, so how you're going to visualize and build workflows. But actually to deliver that application, you need to think about not just that presentational layer, but also the logic and the data. How am I going to fetch data from the backend? How am I going to massage it so I can fit it into the UI components? And C3 AI platform supports anything that you want to build, so you can use React.js if you want to, you can use Vue.js if you want to, or any mobile SDK. But we also know that when you're thinking about these things, there's immense complexity because it's not just presentation, logic, and data. Even when you're done with that, you just finished the development aspect of the application, but now you need to think about API drifting. What's going to happen once you start changing the backend? Will the front end keep up? Testing, infrastructure, deployment, monitoring. And those are all things that you need to think about when delivering either a mobile application or a web application, specifically the front end. And then you also need to care about the non-functional requirements that your business will care about. Things like is the application performant? Does it scale? Is it reliable? So all of these are things that if you are using any out-of-the-box, out-of-the-shelf UI framework, you'll have to figure out by yourself, and I'm pretty sure some of you already have teams thinking about these things, but we've baked in a UI framework with C3 AI platform. So this is a native UI framework and a native component library that will tremendously accelerate your delivery speed, so you can focus mostly on building what the business needs and not so much into those non-functional requirements, figuring out how to massage data, fetch data, and all of that. So at the core of our UI stack, there's two pieces. One is the UI framework, which is effectively a framework that allows you to code with low-code tooling, so you can build UIs through low-code experiences. Obviously, there's always going to be a need for deep code experiences, so we have full support for React. You can mix and match. UI framework supports that. And then on top of that, we have a component library that has out-of-the-box components for both visualizing data, but also building workflows. So you can go from insights all the way to actions. So picking up where KD left, KD built the backend functionality to support the business requirement. In this case, the business requirement was pretty straightforward. We just want to show, we want to colorize wind turbines depending on their last event. So if a wind turbine is foregoing unplanned maintenance, we want to colorize it in a different way. KD actually built the backend for us. He wrote an expression, so we have all the data. We're ready to go. So let me switch here to my VS Code. And to this side, we're good. And so just like KD, a typical workflow would be KD would commit his source code to version control system. That could be Git or any other version control system. As a front-end developer, I would check out those changes, and I would have access to the latest code. So let me clean up things a little bit here. I'll move this out of the way. And VS Code also packs in functionality to accelerate UI development. So I'll put my VS Code here to the side with my application. So I'm actually running this application. VS Code is monitoring. Oh, actually, the changes is already done, so we can revert that a little bit. So in this case, since we did a dry run, you're already seeing the change, but let's imagine that the change is not here. You can see that there's the application, there's a map keeping track of wind turbines. All of this is interactive. There's pie charts and bar charts to give us a sense of all the events that have been happening for these wind turbines. And so what's happening under the hood is VS Code is actually monitoring my UI files. It's serving this application. And so what I'll do as a front-end developer is I'll find the file for my UI. So I'll navigate to UI directory. I have this file over here that defines the behavior for the wind turbine. So if I save it, I think what happened before was we actually had the change. So let me refresh. You'll be able to see the wind turbine map without the changes. So sometimes it takes a little bit, but it's compiling. It takes a little bit of time because what's actually happening under the hood is VS Code is taking my entire application and it's regenerating an application on the fly completely in React. So this was where I was supposed to have my application. I don't have the business requirement filled in. And so let me just show you if I can find the snippet of code just for demo's sakes. This typical change would just require me to tweak here the low-code configuration for this component. Notice that I'm not describing how to fetch data or handle error states or loading states or any of that. So in this low-code configuration file, all I'm saying is I want a map. I'm also saying what type is backing my data. So in this case, KD already coded a wind turbine type for me. That wind turbine type has multiple fields, including latitude and longitude. So I'm going to use those to drive the presentational component. And then what I'm going to do is I'll tweak this a little bit by adding this snippet of code. And what I'll say is, look, I want to tweak the marker colors a little bit based on what's coming from the latest event. So if the latest event for this specific wind turbine or a specific wind turbine is set to unplanned maintenance, let's colorize it in red. That's the business requirement. And since I'm very proactive, no one asked me to do this, but for planned events, if things are well and planned with that specific wind turbine, let's just mark them as gray. They're probably going to be shut off for maintenance, so we'll probably signal that to our business users. So as I'll save this, I'll have some issues here. We're running a development build, so I can ignore this for a time being. What I would expect is VS Code to fully recompile the application and let me know, and it did. So I'm ready to go. I'll just refresh my browser, and in no time I can validate that my change is actually implemented all the way from the back end all the way to the front end.
All right.
So let's just recap what you just saw. You saw that VS Code gives you tooling not just for back-end development, but also front-end development. We only scratched the surface in this demo. So I told you that we actually have support for both low code and deep code. So if you want to build UIs with React or low code and React, you can mix and match. You'll have the same level of support from VS Code. It will monitor all of those files for you. You'll have a continuously feedback loop that allows you to make the change in your code and then get a preview. We only scratch the surface in terms of what component library has out of the box. There's hundreds of UI components ready to go for your data visualizations and workflow needs. And as I said, we don't really expect, we're talking about enterprise grade applications, so we don't really expect to give you all of the components that you need. There's always going to be the need for you to have something really custom for your business needs, in which case you just bring in React with whatever libraries you want, whether those React libraries are open source or licensed. You can just build it, and what we expect to happen, and we see it with our customers, is over time you build the library of components that you maintain. And so you end up using a combination of our UI components with your UI components to assemble these enterprise applications quickly and in a reusable way.
All right, so the story's not done though, right? So we basically have at this point done back-end changes, we made some front-end changes, but there's still the CI process, and that really is what brings together the entire team again. So really to enable a proper, successful multi-role AI team, we need to have integrated an iterative DevOps cycle. And that looks something that like this, and of course it's gonna be an iterative process, so the linearity there is not the truth, but it's helpful to communicate. So after code development is done, you have to integrate your code. That's making sure that all the code from different sources are sitting well together. That triggers a CI process or a CI build, right? Of course, you're monitoring that CI build. You're looking for any test failures. You're looking for any metrics that you really care about. That'd be code coverage. And then finally, once you have a certain criteria and you've met it, then you're ready to deploy, right? That could be into test environments, then into QA, production, and beyond. And I again want to emphasize that this is not as traditionally used to be thought as a DevOps role. This is a role that's really, this is a phase of the application development cycle that's important to every member of that multi-role team. And so I'm going to do a quick demo on this as well. This timer is saying I have 1 minute, but I'm just going to keep going. Give me 1 second. All right, should be good. So in that same tool that we were talking about, did you zoom in?
Yeah.
Okay. In that same tool that we were talking about, C3 AI Studio, there's also features around CI. And what I'm showing you right now is a tool called Release Management, and this is where you can understand your CI process, you can trigger new CI builds, you can register new branches across your source control systems, and just central location for all CI-related workflows. So here, I'm not going to do it live because builds sometimes take time, but you can register new branches, right? You can specify specifically the repository token, the path, the branches that you want. We support regex, so like any sort of prefix that you want can be followed as a rule so that you register multiple different branches and look at multiple different application versions. In this case, I have one already set up. If you look at this, this shows you the trend of this specific branch, how many builds have been built over time. Again, this is sort of in the last few days that I've done this. You can see the status of these things. Some have failed outright. Some have test failures specifically. You can see the duration. You can see how long it takes. I'm going to click in on the latest build here. And once you click on a specific latest build, you get a few more metrics specifically for this build, right? You see how many tests have passed, how many have failed, how many have been skipped. You immediately get insight into which ones have failed, which tests have failed. There's also a pipeline view here. And the pipeline here is to communicate clearly to the end users, right? These different members of this AI team, what are the specific steps that the CI took? So that if things failed beforehand, you know exactly what went wrong. You can click on them and to understand the logs in more detail. Now let's go back to the overview here. See a bunch of test failures here. You can also see which packages were tested, which application packages. And if you look at the bottom, it's of course that wind turbine package that we were working on. And if you recall, I showed you a test failure, right, where it said 12 expected 13 or something along those lines. And we can find that same failure over here by clicking into this specific package. You can see the test trends of this package as well, how it's performed over time, specifically what SHA, what commit it was actually working on. I'm going to keep clicking in to get a little bit deeper. Ultimately, we get to a position where we have the test failure. And this is going to load, and it's going to show you the exact same thing, 12 expected 13. Of course, this is sort of a trivial example, but this is for the case of the demo, right? The whole point here is, go back to this slide real quick. And present. The whole point here is to communicate that these workflows are built in, and in V8, we have a lot more to offer. So this tool comes out of the box, right? It's out of the box CI, pre-configured and self-contained. I know some of us had earlier conversations about air-gapped environments and sort of the complexities there. And so this is a tool that we hope enables CI to be very accessible, very easy to do, very easy to integrate into your process, even in such harsh, hard to communicate environments. There's also horizontal scaling that accommodates high volumes when you're looking to actually push out a lot of CI, but also accommodates low volumes when you're looking to actually sort of pause, and you know, this can help you save costs because it only is dynamically scaled up when you need it to be. There's a transparent and configurable CI. That's what I showed you today. We have defaults, but then it's going to be configurable so that you can adjust it to your specific workflows. There are workflows to register any number of version control branches, which is what I showed you earlier with that form, right? There are workflows to trigger builds based on time schedules, which is sort of the default that we have, but also can be on code changes so that every time you make a code change, triggers a new CI process. Or you can do it manually. You can just go there and click trigger new build. There's also a central interface, which is what I showed you here, where you can view your build metrics, review your test results for all your applications, and then also deep dive into logs. And finally, taking these build artifacts, you can start new applications. And that's the first path to going from development into deployment and production and beyond. And to really summarize, right, we want to make sure that this message is heard, is that to build successful large-scale enterprise AI applications, we have a multi-role team. And there are members of this multi-role team that do different things, but they need to be able to work together really seamlessly to create these applications and deliver and accelerate and deliver these AI applications, right? And in this session, again, we focused on the bottom half there, which is really the application development lifecycle. But again, as I was mentioning, right after this session, we'll have an ML session on the ML on the AI platform, and they'll talk a little bit more in detail about the data science workflows and the data science features that we have in our platform.